Welcome, welcome, welcome everybody to another edition of Hot Program. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast. And as always, folks, I am in airplane mode. And now a man who wishes happy Mother's Day to everyone, everywhere, all at once. A man who needs no introduction. A man who does need your concern and consideration, because your mother's in the hospital right now, and that's where you're spending your Mother's Day. Is this correct?
Coming to you live for a parking garage near Birmingham, Alabama. Yeah, but
Yeah, man.
and thank you, Pocket Locker. Happy Mother's Day to everyone.
Happy Mother's Day.
My mom is actually coherent, so when she gets a bladder infection, there's no telling how she's gonna be. Like she might not be coherent at all, but she's 85, and this morning she's talking and awake. And when I saw her Thursday, I introduced her to my wife for the first time, and she looked at her in a very dismissive way, as opposed to having a conversation. When I went up there a little bit ago, they were talking. So it's a big difference between not feeling good and feeling good. So you can pray all you want, but when they start giving you units of blood and platelets and pumping you full of antibiotics to fight off your gallbladder bursting, you know what? You just might be okay, as opposed to the gentle laying on of hands by churchmen and prayer, which might be comforting, but doesn't really have the healing power you
So mom
need.
didn't come to the wedding?
No, no, no.
So
I
like
had COVID.
COVID. I was
I
gonna
had
say there was a
COVID. So a
COVID. Yeah,
lot of
you had
people that
COVID at
wanted
the
to go to the
time.
wedding couldn't go.
So this is the first time they've met, and it's not under ideal circumstances.
It's not. My mom is a captive audience, though, I will say.
Now, have there
So,
been any clergy sent
well,
over,
my
or
my aunt is in ministry, and I have an uncle who's a minister of a church. I bet he and his wife, who I wanted to see, will be over here later today, because we're leaving tomorrow, and I want to see them before I go.
sure?
So I always enjoy sitting down and talking with them at length. I don't know that I can do that today. But
Yeah,
yeah, yesterday, no, Friday night, there were like nine of us in the room. So, and my mom is just like, my mom's out of it. And there's all these people in her room. And I'm going, I'm sure she'd like to be awake for this. But,
so they haven't had any ministers there, but there's been family prayer and that type of thing.
because my family who was in there, they all know I'm an atheist. I'm pretty sure they thought he's just going to poke fun of us if we do this. So let's wait till he steps out to get a soda before we pray, and then hurry up and pray. But no, I didn't see that happen. I'm sure it has happened, Pocket Locker.
I
There
think
was a
I think
minister. A minister did leave. I remember now. My sister told me before my wife had showed up. She goes, "The minister just left." I'm like, just in time, eh? She probably warned him. My atheist brother is on his way. You better get out of here
you
before
know
he
what
starts asking questions.
I think there's a lot of that. I think there's a lot of that. Like I noticed when I went home last time, and my grandparents were there. Like my mom tried to get them to say their grace to themselves. Like, oh, say it to yourself tonight. Say it to yourself tonight. Kind of like normally, we'd have family grace out loud and say prayer before we eat this food. But since I was there, say it to yourself, say it to yourself, say it to yourself.
Hmm.
So there's a way there's a certain cognitive dissonance there that's very interesting. Crystal, thanks for dropping links. Definitely subscribe to the Casino Theater and Arcade channel. That's where I have my gaming and stuff, and I've been getting ready to start streaming over there again because I want to do more fun stuff and just sort of more chill gaming streams. So Definitely head over to the Casino Theater and Arcade channel and subscribe if you're not already. Subscribe to the Hot Program channel if you're a fan of this show, because this show does have its own channel. Subscribe to my One Black Friends channel if you're watching on my channel or the Hot Program channel. Uh, Definitely appreciate that, and of course, y'all could show some love and drop a few ducats in the golden plate if you'd like. Appreciate you, Crystal. Great to see you, Carrie Ann. Liz Allen's here as well. Look at the trees is in the building. Trees been seeing you on some of these channels and some of these crazy streams trying to hold people's feet to the fire. Just want you to know, a lot of them streams, man, we're either lurking or we catch them later, and people have been excited to see you, you know, staying on top of people. Holy Shift, great to see you, great to see you. All right. So today we're going to be talking about, is Christianity good for Black people? I think the answer is no.
Depends on if the money's coming in or going out.
um, and I haven't really seen much of this, so it's another one of those Jude 6 projects. And to be honest with you, I think this entire Jude 6 project and this sort of, I don't know if I would call it a movement or whatever direction that their particular community and thing is going in, I think that whole thing is misguided. I just think it's a doomed project. But one thing I will say about what I've seen so far from this video is, just previewing it, I think we got to be critical about what they're saying, because there's very much a Black church aesthetic to these people. You'll see that in like the way they're dressed and kind of the way they talk and handle themselves. And then there's a way in which I'm not sure if they're taking the challenge of Christianity seriously and the challenges to their faith seriously. And that's why I think these things are misguided, because it's one thing to challenge the faith, and if you do so, obviously, and you take it seriously, I think that that's productive. But I think they're almost doing the apologetic sort of challenge, where we want to ask these hard questions, we want to challenge our faith, but in reality, you know, they're going to do some shape shifting and contorting to come back to Team Jesus, I think, in the end. And I think that that's a problem, because it makes people think that they've done the hard work. It makes people think they've critically looked into their faith. It makes people think that they're on the quest for truth, and really they're on the quest for comfort. So we'll see. YouTube Punk, always good to see you here. Appreciate you, brother. Go ahead, my
Pocket
one black
Locker,
friend.
when you say Pocket Locker, there's a Black church aesthetic. Do you mean that the men are dressed like one of the comedians from the original Kings of
Yes,
Comedy
yes,
movie?
yes. That's exactly what I mean. It's precisely what I mean.
Okay.
Uh,
You, by the way,
uh-oh.
see several.
You can't. Your camera got flipped again. How does your camera get flipped when that happens?
It messed up your voice. It turned you into like a Minnie Mouse kind of voice, Pocket Locker.
Yeah. The audio got jacked up too.
What on earth? What is happening here?
Can you try refreshing?
It clicked off.
Stephanie Helms is here. Good to see you.
What on earth?
Yeah, and the audio went all weird.
Hold on, I'm rebooting my.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. I'll wait a second.
Are you there, Pocket Locker?
Yeah, I'm here, but you're still upside down. Let's see if it gives me any. I can't even go back to the other camera. Yeah, it's just, I don't know what happened. This
I don't know
happened
what
earlier. We
happened
thought we
either.
fixed it. You probably got to pop out and pop back in.
Let me refresh. See
Do you
if
need me
that
to
does
send
it.
you the link to your email?
I think you said go out and come back in.
Yes, I did.
Okay. Are you there?
All right, you look better. How is things sounding on your end?
It's not coming through my headphones. I'm gonna try to get it to go through my headphones.
Okay.
Because it's using the phone's microphone, which might be a. Oh no.
Cheers, Gary.
Okay. Now can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can you hear all right?
Yes, I can. Thankfully.
All right, here we go.
The Courageous Conversations Conference is so important because where else can we have these types of conversations with these types of thought leaders about these types of topics?
It is a unique and a rare opportunity to come and hear voices that have been trained in diverse places, coming together to ask these kind of critical questions in humility, in love, in conviction, and in courage.
If you're on the fence in a broader sense about any questions you have to do with the faith, this is the right place.
This is modeling for us. How do we live in a world in which there's a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different points of view, even in the church? And how do I navigate that and not have to compromise what I believe?
But that is exactly why all of us need to be attending the Courageous Conversations Conference, because in a world full of crucifixion, somebody needs to start having the conversation.
Where else can you come and get both perspectives from predominantly black and brown leaders, thinkers, scholars, preachers, pastors? There's nowhere else you can go. You need to be here at the Courageous Conversations Q3.
All right, so y'all see the vibes, right? It's very pro-black, and we black forward, and we gonna get into the black issues. But you already hear the both sides is going on, and I gotta say, I highly doubt when Christians do these things that they really allow the atheists to bring the heat. But we gonna see. If y'all want to check out the conference, y'all think we should go to that conference? Should we start a GoFundMe? So we should go to this conference in August.
Interesting idea.
Hey, Washington, D.C. Hey.
Interesting idea.
Hey. Chad, what y'all think?
When faith disappoints, hey, tune in each week.
Good morning.
It's a hot program.
Exactly.
I'm really excited to have a wonderful conversation around the subject. Is Christianity good for black people? I'm really excited about our esteemed panelists and the wonderful insight
Get y'all a little
that they're
more
going to
volume.
bring to this discussion. Before we jump in, will I pass around and you just say your name and we will jump right into the questions, starting with Dr. Francois.
Willie Francois.
Good morning, Gabby. I should flip this over, yes? Good morning, Gabby Cudger-Wilkes.
Good morning, Micah Edmondson is my name.
Good morning. My name is Tiffany Gill.
Thank you all. Well, as we begin, the first question I want to ask you all, for some reason, the question, is Christianity good for black people, seems sort of unfounded. All they've known, people, is the black church. But to get us up to speed, where does this question come from? In other words, what is this question's origins? And whoever wants to jump in can jump right in.
Well, I'll go ahead and jump in. I mean, I think the question comes from the very real fact that in the name of Christ, whether or not that's actual Christianity is something we will talk about, but that in the name of Christ, Europeans and European Americans, whether it's from those who were involved in the slave trade or those who rioted right here at the nation's capital on January 6th a few years ago, have done things, specifically done things to oppress African Americans. And so the thought is, the argument, I guess, from that question is, why would black people then identify with the religion of their oppressors? And I think that, and this is hopefully something we'll get to explore, but that question is overly simplistic and in many ways just reifies what the enslavers, what those who have oppressed black people have done, that when we actually look at the history of the black church and what a formation in Christ has done for our people, we will see, I think in many ways, that the black church is probably one of the strongest witnesses of what Christ has done in this country, and that it's actually a miracle, and that without the Black church, without a rooting and grounding in Christianity, I'm not sure that African American people would have endured as long as we have.
Can you pause it? Can you pause it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Finally, someone who gives a longer answer to a question than me. Finally. I think there's a lot in what she said, and I think some of it didn't belong there. The January 6th part, I think you could eliminate, but whatever, she said it. I think what many of our audience members will understand is that a lot of people in Africa that were brought to the United States had not been exposed to Christianity. Some of them had been exposed to Judaism, though. Quite a few of them probably had been exposed to that, but not Christianity. So they're brought to this country. They're indoctrinated with Christianity. The Bible is altered for their consumption to make them more subservient, more to make it more palatable, and to get them to believe that, look, you can take all the oppression we throw at you here because that makes you a good Christian. And when you're raptured the heck out of here, by the way, Jesus is coming back in any second. When you're raptured out of here, you'll go up to heaven. And well, they didn't have the rapture doctrine back then, but when you get out of here, right, you go to meet God in the air, Jesus in the air, then life is going to be better because New Jerusalem will come down from the sky. There'll be a new heaven and a new earth, and you'll live there because God, in God's house there are many mansions, and Jesus is going to prepare a place for you because you enslaved person are indeed his disciple. Now, in my opinion, the Black church has kept this illusion going. And what has been done through time and circumstances, the slave master is taken out of the picture. But the indoctrination that you are supposed to be a good servant hasn't. You are supposed to be a good servant for Christ. In the United States, many Black people didn't have equal opportunities to their white counterparts, to their immigrant from other countries counterparts. And so the leaning on the Christian illusion was pretty much, other than their family and the air they breathe, all they had. So it kept them going.
Yeah. Your mic's crispy. It's like roboting again or whatever.
Is it?
Yeah.
I have my other earbuds, but I can try to switch to the phone's mic. Maybe that would work.
No, try the other earbuds because the phone might give us an echo with the speaker.
Well, I can listen on the phone. I can listen on the headphones and just use the mic.
Oh, anyway, yeah, that might work. Yeah, give it a shot.
Yeah.
All right. Katina said, sounds like Stockholm syndrome. Absolutely, positively, yes, it does. It is Stockholm syndrome. The other thing I was going to mention, she did say a lot of interesting stuff. So one that was very interesting was there was a way in which she quickly dissociated like their faith in what has been done in the more dominant church tradition. So you saw that when she said, well, in the name of Christianity, like allegedly or whatever she said, right? Like so-called Christianity. It was very much this idea that what Black Christians believe is, and again, you have to remember, as slaves, as Black people, being in a Black church, obviously you're not going to have a theology that's anti-Black. But this idea that this sort of pro-Black theology is the real Christianity, and what them other folks are doing is not even really Christianity. And I say that that's a problem because I get that, again, I get that desire to say that I have the real faith and the real faith loves people like me, but it overlooks the core institutional situation. All right. Um, hey, my one black friend, can you hear us? Man.
Okay, Pakman, I can't hear you. I don't know why. It's not switching audio to my earbuds, and they
All
are
right, you
fully
can
charged.
try your headphones in the phone mic, I guess. All right, put him backstage for a minute. So that was, that's a problem, and my message to black believers would be, yeah, I got to cut that out. Yeah, I got to cut that out, because the majority of the culture is going to dominate what the culture does, and it doesn't help us to try to hang on to this other notion of Christianity. I get that socially and politically that might be comforting, but the reality is Christianity is used as a tool of institutionalized white supremacy, and we've got to come to grips with that. The other thing, to put this next point a little bit simpler, because my one black friend touched on it too. I think she's definitely conflating the notion of, well, we wouldn't be here without the black church, and the black church was so essential to our struggle and all of this, with the fact that we had no other means of agency, that effectively folks only really had a voice in the church. The other thing is, you notice how they're not talking about believing the essential claims. Literally, this person posed the question of, well, why then do black people choose to identify with the religion of their oppressor? Right? Choose to identify. If Christianity was really true, it wouldn't be about what you choose to identify. It would be about God is God and God is real and whatever. But you can see that for a lot of black folks, this is really about identity, and that they do. And for most of us now as non-believers, right, we pick up on that real quick. But that's what I mean. Like, they don't even notice how their language kind of gives away the game in that regard. The other thing is, black folk love to have a sort of fictive history where we read our struggle into the Bible, where the American civil rights struggle is literally a parallel to Moses going to Pharaoh and saying, "Let my people go." We literally fail to realize that book is not about us. The other thing is the audacity to look at real actualized history and say, we are the chosen and blessed people of God because we were freed, rather than understanding that if there is a God, we definitely ain't his chosen people because we were enslaved to begin with. And I think Jewish people have a similar cognitive dissonance that they try to deal with it. And a lot of them have dealt with it, to be clear. There's even movies about it. James Apperson covered a movie about it at one point. There's like a movie where Jewish Holocaust victims basically put God on trial. Maybe the movie's even called God on Trial. Somebody in the chat might remember. But anyway, it's a very similar thing where they realize this only happened to us. When we say Holocaust, we literally think of the genocide of Jewish people. How are y'all the chosen ones? Especially when you contrast that with what the notion of a Messiah actually was to the actual people in the Bible, right? To that original Jewish tradition of it, right? It was the idea of a conquering military hero that was going to bring you into power. So, you just see a lot of but I love the fact that she said all that, because to me, this is what it's really like having conversations and how black Christians really talk. And so I'm really glad we got to highlight some of those things. I don't know what happened to one black friend. Here we go.
Yeah. I think I would mentioned that even the white supremacist slaveholders knew that they were distorting the Christian faith. Anglican planters would read every Lord's Day, would read the words of the Apostles' Creed that said, "I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church." That word Catholicity, meaning the spiritual, tangible, economic, social blessings of God's redemptive freedom, was intended not merely for one people, but for all people, people from every tribe, nation, and tongue. And yet, and because they read the Apostles' Creed, they actually knew that Christianity had the power to upend their racial caste system. They knew this. In volume 2 of his History of the United States, there's a historian named George Bancroft, who asserts essentially that early colonial planters were afraid to administer baptism to enslaved people because the prevailing belief was that Christian baptism would automatically manumit the enslaved person. And he says this quote, "The idea was so deep and so general that South Carolina in 1712, Maryland in 1715, and Virginia repeatedly from 1667 to 1748 set forth enactments that baptism did not confer freedom." So the idea was so prevailing that baptism and Christianity actually frees people socially, that the legislator had to come in and say, no, that's not what it does. That's not what it does. And what happened is the colonial planters took their religious marching orders not from the church, but from the state. The state was the one that actually told them how to understand the Christian faith. In 1667, Virginia legislature said this. It says, "Whereas some doubts have arisen whether children that are slaves by birth and by the charity and piety of their owners made partakers of the blessed sacraments of baptism should by virtue of their baptism be made free, it is enacted and declared by this grand assembly and the authority thereof that the conferring of baptism does not alter the condition of the person as to his bondage or freedom." And they took their marching orders again in that place from the state rather than from the church. But the witness, as my dear sister just said, the witness of the gospel and the power of Christianity was that despite the distortion of the slaveholder, Christ made himself clear in his freedom to the enslaved. And so, you can read the work of the late Albert Roboteau that talks about the invisible institution and how our enslaved ancestors actually knew the real Jesus and actually understood the real gospel. And after a long day of backbreaking toil would sneak off into the woods in order to worship Jesus the way he ought to be worshiped and to preach the gospel the way it ought to be preached. And so that's a powerful witness that Christianity is in fact good for black people. That is the real Christianity.
Thank you.
Okay, so we see more of this cognitive dissonance, y'all. More of this, and you heard him say it. The real Christianity is good for black people, dog. What is the real Christianity, dog? I'm here to tell you, the real Christianity is what most Christians do, and most Christians is them people. It's them people. You know what I'm talking about, y'all? When we talking 70 to 80% of evangelicals are Trump supporters. You understand what I'm saying to you? 70 to 80% of evangelicals are on team anti-woke, anti-DEI, team gerrymandering so that black people don't have autonomy in their communities, team state takeovers so that black people don't have autonomy in their communities, team we're concerned about voter irregularities so that we can create more barriers to voting so that we can disenfranchise black voters. That's them people, y'all. And so this story was just crazy. It just shows you the crazy cognitive dissonance and the backflips that these people have to go through to hang on to this faith. And instead of realizing that then people don't care, they've never cared. And to blame it on the state rather than recognizing the state policies were a reflection of the people in power and the citizens who were largely white Christians. So it's white Christians who wanted to be Christian, but also wanted to keep you enslaved, that realized, oh, we can't have a law where just baptizing means you're free now. No, being baptized doesn't mean you're free now. Let's see if my one black friend is back in the saddle. Can you hear us okay?
I hear you okay. Can you hear me okay without a lot of...
Yeah, you sound fine. You sound great.
Okay.
So yeah, we're just keep rolling. We just heard another explanation about how the real black Christianity is actually good for black people. So there's definitely a theme that they're on. And this particular guy was talking about how there was the original idea, right, that if you were baptized or whatever, then you were a Christian, and if you were Christians couldn't enslave other Christians, but basically saying that when they changed that and they made it so that your status as with regard to slave or free did not change, they used that to say that the oppression of the black people came from the state, not from the faith, which is just a crazy contortion of who was running the state, how much their faith motivated them. And again, it's this over, and I'm gonna just keep it real. In that sense, a lot of white folks have never seen black people as their equals in terms of their humanity. And to me, what all of that says is that it reveals that, one, their Christian faith really never did condemn slavery, and it doesn't. That's another misunderstanding. And he kept saying that. He kept saying that Jesus was clear about this, and the real slaves went off and they worshiped the real Jesus after a long, hard day of slaving away. They went into the woods and snuck off so they could worship Jesus the way it was meant to be worshipped. And it's just crazy. Like, first off, even now, 2,000 years later, we still have to have these debates about the slavery in the Bible. And what are we constantly told by Christians? Oh, well, during that time, that was that culture, that was their milieu.
Different back then.
And so the Bible, and effectively what they're saying is the Bible had to permit slavery. It had to be tolerant of slavery.
It did not have to.
Which it did not have to. And then a lot of them, and they brought in that lie, like Jesus said the truth. No, Jesus actually said told slaves to obey their masters.
Yes, be obedient. Mm-hmm.
So,
and masters not to be cruel.
So this, right. So then they want to turn around and say that Christianity is what fought for our freedom. No, we fought for our freedom, and we had to do so from within the confines of a Christian identity for our safety. But it is not that the gospel of Jesus Christ saved us.
I'll tell you, as I drive my wife around the American South. By the way, folks, my wife is an immigrant. She's not from the United States. I'm waiting to drive by a farm or a plantation that still has slave quarters on it. And maybe they haven't been maintained, maybe they're falling down, but some of those structures are still standing in the South. I've seen them in Georgia, certainly. I've seen them in, I think I saw them in South Carolina too.
I was just about to say South Carolina. Yep, I've seen them in South Carolina, all over, just right down the highway.
Down here in Alabama, I haven't seen one on this trip. We would drive around in the day and the night, haven't seen one. But I want to point them out to her. Now, they had slavery in Cuba too. She's highly aware of that, but I just wanted to get her an idea of what was going on here in the U.S. Because to some degree, it was different than what her ancestors in Cuba would have endured. I don't know how different, but a bit different because they're here, not there. The fact remains, and Matt Dillahunty has pointed this out, and so have others. It would have been so easy for Jesus just to give us a sentence or two. Hey, owning people is wrong. I've said this to someone who was a fellow atheist, and he says, but the guy I said it to is a Caucasian male, exceedingly affluent, like a 1%er, really sharp guy. I said it to him, and he's like, "But haven't you benefited from it?" And I said, "The truth of it is, I wouldn't even be alive if there was no slave trade. Me being alive is a coincidence of the slave trade, one of the many outcomes of it. But I'll give that up so that millions of people don't die."
Yeah, I don't know. Those are meaningless what ifs, and usually they're very poorly motivated. They're very poorly motivated. Yeah, if somebody even asked me a question, well, didn't benefit in slavery? It's kind of a gross question to be. It's kind of offensive to tell a black person that they should. Maybe you should ponder how you benefited from that. Like, well, people just wilding.
He didn't think it was offensive.
I know he didn't think it was, but that's what I'm saying. But go ahead. No, that's cool. You can tell your story. I'm just saying. Go ahead.
This is a man I've sat with, and we offended other people together. So as atheists, so I know I know him well enough to know he's like, but how come you don't think that way? Like, he wasn't trying to offend me. He was trying to understand, but like, isn't this so matter of fact that you benefited from it? And I of course I went on to explain. Here's why that isn't the case from my standpoint of view. But I told him, you go ask one of my brothers or my sister, and they might say yes. You're not going to get that from me.
And to be honest with you, that is still the oppression. That is still, to me, that is a reflection, because it's a right-wing talking point. And so it's very frustrating that and this is why we need to be politically aware and, to me, and socially active, because if not, we literally have these talking points and these ideas creeping into our community. And it's because I know some people that would say it too. You know what I'm saying? Like, I definitely know some people that would say it, but I would also had to work very hard not to go upside their heads for saying that. And maybe what I would do is start to pull up some of these right-wing. Basically what I would really do is I would start to pull up some of these clips of like right-wing politicians that I know they hate saying this over and over again. I think maybe that would be an interesting way to see what they think about that after. But yeah, let's keep rolling. We already gonna have to do multiple parts of this.
Absolutely. I would add.
Exactly, you see.
I want to affirm this question as a positive question. And so any theologian that does the work of liberation has to apply reading strategies, which are called hermeneutics, of suspicion. And so I want us to begin here. This is the kind of conference that allows for questions.
Hang on a second.
I want us to affirm the question. This question as a positive question. I would add, I want to affirm this question as a positive question. And so any theologian that does the work of liberation has to apply reading strategies, which are called hermeneutics, of suspicion. And so I want us to begin here. This is the kind of conference that allows for questions. I want us to affirm the question because it is important for us to interrogate. Is this really what they say it is? Right? That work, that hermeneutic of suspicion is what really liberates us to discover Jesus of the Bible and not Jesus of the state, right? And so my short answer, and we'll go deeper, is that when Black folks are able to uncover the true liberating witness, the Luke 4:18 missional reason why Jesus comes to set captives free and to give sight to the blind and to release the year of the Lord's favor, when we realize that Christ comes to undo all the stuff that tries to keep us bound, then it is necessarily a good thing for Black folks to be Christian because we are following the master liberator and we employ the same hermeneutic of suspicion that Jesus comes to undo and to say, if you are suspicious, if this is how people should be treated, you are right to be suspicious because folks are not to be bound. But in Galatians 5, it is for freedom that we have set them free. And so submit not to a yoke of slavery. And so The short answer is yes, it is good when we follow the true liberating practices of Jesus Christ as Christians, and when we keep our hermeneutic of suspicion, even in 2023, when folks try to take us back to the way the state would rather utilize Christianity as opposed to why Christ came for the purposes of liberation, salvation, redemption, and life.
All right, go ahead. And don't say you didn't have a wait. Hang, I just want to say real quickly. Don't say we didn't take you to church on Mother's Day. Okay, you may not go to church with your mother. Okay, but if you watched our program, we didn't take you to church on Mother's Day today. Go ahead, my one black friend.
A different kind of Christian programming. Here's the deal. She's talking about hermeneutics, stressing it's about the way you read something. So, okay. She read set the captives free as eventually setting them free from slavery. That's not what that's supposed to mean, folks. If you go into reading Daniel, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Zechariah, setting the captives free means freeing Israel from its oppression. Not setting my father's grandmother, who was born a slave, had nothing to do with her. It was setting the people who were captives free back then, 2,000, 2,500, and even more years ago. It had nothing to do with a person walking around in 2024. Nothing. It had nothing to do with a person walking around in the year 1600. Nothing to do with them. So she's making it fit what she wants it to fit so that she makes a good point. And it will resonate with many people in her audience who don't want to acknowledge that it was a failure on Jesus's part. He did. You can read that whole Bible to cover to cover and tell me someone, give me the name of someone he set free. Let me read it for myself. Give me chapter and verse where Jesus of Nazareth set anybody free. They might say, well, he set people emotionally free. That's not setting someone free.
Yeah, and
right.
And
that's not
yeah.
setting someone in chains free. That's not setting someone with a debt where they're obligated to pay in a human being, right? That's not setting them free at all.
Yeah. What's interesting is there's a quote, and you know this quote too. I forget who it's by. But basically it's by maybe one of these mythicist people or something like that. But it's basically the idea that they say something like, I'm not saying that, basically they're saying that they believe that ancient people during the biblical times were smart enough to not take it literally. And now we do take it literally. Somebody out there has heard this quote.
I think
you know who it is.
I think a great number of great number of people have said things like that. And I believe it's true. For instance, the talking snake in the Garden of Eden. I think most people 2,500 years ago didn't believe there was a talking serpent. They see it as an allegory. But today, look, I'm in Alabama.
I found it.
You did? Okay.
Yeah. My point, once again, is not that those ancient people told literal stories and we are now smart enough to take them symbolically, but that they told them symbolically and we are now dumb enough to take them literally. And that's John Dominic Crossan. Now, the reason I brought that up is this.
Yeah.
I think this is especially true of slaves. When I think about real, slaves, like, especially the first generation, like people who let's say they reached adulthood in Africa, right? Survived the Middle Passage. Maybe on a slave ship named Jesus. True story.
Jesus was the first slave ship. That was the name of the first slave ship. Just so
I knew it was one of them. I know it was the first, but literally, like maybe on a slave ship
yeah,
named
that's the
Jesus, right?
first slave ship to come to America.
And then they lived their middle adult years as slaves in America. There's no way they believed in Jesus, literally. No fucking way. No way. Okay? And I even think they probably would have made sure their kids ain't believe that stuff. I think what they literally did, and theirs wasn't even thinking about it symbolically or metaphorically. No, theirs was literally, we out here in this field all day dreaming about freedom. Yeah, we dreaming about freedom. Oh, cause what we need is freedom. Oh, Master Jesus. All day we're dreaming about Jesus. Right? I think that was literally their Christianity. And stuff like they, when finally maybe they were allowed to read a book. What book was that going to be? It was going to be that edited slaves Bible. And so I think our ancestors were smart enough to know this was the white man's religion because they lived it. They lived being whipped under the lashes, and they had their own faiths and their own traditions.
Yeah, they
and
more
so
than likely had
now,
their own.
and so now I think we're dealing with black folks who are now silly enough to take it literally, and we've made that our generational tradition. So sad. So
Yeah,
sad.
so in Africa or even like Australia with the Aborigines, they might have had the story of the bird and the turtle, or the frog and the crocodile, things like that, right? That's what they had in their story. And they can just see in nature, well, birds clearly sing to each other. And that's how they have their conversations. But they didn't actually create the world, scratching in the dust to create people. They didn't actually do that. It's so you can learn something about your environment. It's so you can learn something about how to deal with other people, how to deal with your family, your children, your elders. I think they got that.
But see, I would
Got
even say that like now, like that type of thing, like I don't even think that that's religion in the same way as what we do now. I don't even think
It's
that
not.
that's because it's not it's really something different. It's more in line with our tradition of fiction and stories and entertainment and the way we use them to teach lessons and things. I just want to touch on this real quick too. Was to me her response highlighted what I meant about the danger of this type of exercise and how much they're not taking it seriously. Remember that she started y'all by saying, I want to affirm the question, right? Not she wasn't saying I want to answer in the affirmative, but I want to affirm the question. In other words, she wanted to praise posing the question of is Christianity good for black people, because it was important and because you have to have the hermeneutics of skepticism. You see what I'm saying? And so that's that thing. That's that attitude of we're going to take this seriously and we're really going to dive in and we're going to be skeptical. But you can clearly see in her response, she's not skeptical. And she's not taking the question seriously. She went from, I want to affirm the question, to absolutely good, 100%. Jesus is definitely good for black people. Once you get out of the Jesus of the state and get into the real Jesus, Jesus of liberation and Jesus of radical freedom and all, like, that's what I mean. That's exactly what I meant when I said it's the danger of these people being able to pretend. It's what we see Rebecca Davis do. Right? This is exactly what Rebecca Davis does. I want to jump in. I want to take these questions seriously, but really you're just preaching and evangelizing, and you're not at all taking the possibility of being wrong seriously.
Would a good God, or one that existed at all, allow the state to take over his Jesus? This is his only begotten son, so precious that he sent him down to earth, had him killed, and just decide, oh, well, I'll bring him back to life. if Jesus means that much, why let his legend or his memory become bastardized? Why? Why let it become taken over and used as a tool to
Yes.
oppress people? Why do that? Why? For me, it works flawlessly. It's mythology.
Right.
Because people we know in the ancient world, people put those ancient heroes out there to inspire their troops, to inspire their cultures to greater things, or to not necessarily magical things, but to literally bring their people from the ashes to national prominence. That's what the stories about those heroes were for. And
Yeah.
Israel's God's suffering servant, Israel, is another one of those legends. Rise up from your own ashes, Israel.
Right.
Come out of the infancy of worshiping idols that are from other lands, sacrificing your children, even though, we've gone over that, even though the Bible tells us
Even the racism
in
of the
Ezekiel.
faith. They take this story from essentially from Palestine, and they give you a white God, a white Jesus with all white disciples. I mean, most of the disciples look like most of the professors in an American university. They don't look like people from the Middle East. And so it's just really, it's crazy that they're gonna keep arguing this. Let's keep moving a little bit. Let's try to see how much we can
Okay.
get through.
I think it's an important question for many of the reasons that Reverend Gabby offers to us, but particularly what Reverend Gill raises for us. Not Reverend, did I mistitle you? I'm sorry, Doc. What Dr. Gill gives us is that we really have to interrogate if what we actually call Christianity has anything to do with Jesus, right? Because there's something in the American context that likes to talk about Jesus the Christ without talking about Jesus the carpenter, right? And the reason why I underline Jesus the carpenter, because there has been this organized conspiracy for almost 2,000 years to make Jesus white, right? And not just make Jesus white, but to make Jesus American. And so part of what this question helps us to interrogate is, what are we going to do with this Americanized white Christ that keeps being shoved down our throats by white churches and by certain forms of black churches? So it helps to raise the question for me on, when we talk about Christianity, what are we actually talking about? Because when I look at the type of faith trajectory that I hope I'm on, it doesn't look like the faith trajectory that we find from certain people who live under the banner of Christianity, but actually do not practice the liberating love ethic of the very Jesus that they say they follow. And so we're in a particular time where it's imperative for us, yes, to celebrate that we have been saved by Jesus, but at some point we got to save Jesus from the church. Right? And when I say save Jesus from the church, we have to save Jesus from this state-sponsored form of Christianity that only cares about two policies that limit what people do with their bodies and limit other things that people try to do, and not understanding that Jesus does come from this very liberative ethic. The other thing is to talk about the fact that making Jesus white is also to deny the Hebrewness of Jesus. And when I'm talking about the Hebrewness of Jesus, I'm really talking about the Africanness of Jesus, because Jesus is an Afro-Asiatic brother who lives under a settler colonial oppression, who comes from a crucified class. It's easy for us to talk about the crucifixion as if it's only something that Jesus experienced, without realizing that Jesus comes from people who were crucified on a daily basis, right? And so without that kind of historical context, and to celebrate the Africanness of Judaism and Christianity, without honoring the fact that there is an American conspiracy to make Jesus white, it's a very important question, because maybe what we call Christianity has nothing to do with Jesus the carpenter at all.
All right. Thank you. So let me take this deep.
All right, go ahead. Well, hopefully, I think we're gonna change questions after this.
Okay. To some degree, I think he's making a good point here in that what people are doing is, if we can imagine a palette of colors, as if we're all going to sit down and we're going to make a painting. And I ask each of our audience members, I'm going to start with yellow, guys. Tell me what to add to the yellow. We're going to paint Jesus. So I'm going to start with yellow. Someone says, like YouTube Punk says, throw some that dark green in there. Okay. Pragmatic Crystal says, give me a little of that gold glitter. Put some of that in there. And I keep mixing and mixing and mixing. And finally, it's time to apply some of this multicolored glue glob, which has now become one sparkly color, to the canvas. There was clearly something I started with in mind, right? The yellow in the blank canvas. But now so many people have put in their input, it probably doesn't look anything like the yellow I began with anymore. I can add some of that back in later, right? I can clean my brush and throw some yellow in there. But eventually, when I'm done painting this painting, if I only ever asked for people's input, which colors to mix together, I can still come up with an image that's quite striking and still beautiful. But if I also had a photograph or equivalent, a drawing of what Jesus really looked like, I'm not going to get there if I keep asking people for their input to help me make this image. It won't look like him. It just won't. And I think that's the Jesus we have when you talk to someone. That's the Jesus you get back. The Jesus that reflects their ideas.
Yeah, and that's
I'm
kind of
sure.
good.
Okay, I'll be quick. I'm sure many of us have spoken to a person who is a Christian who said to us in complete sincerity, that's not the God that I believe in. Right? When we give them scriptures that show these horrifying details of the God of the Bible's behavior or Jesus's behavior, that's not the Jesus I believe in. So go ahead, Pakman.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that we're kind of guilty of they're kind of guilty of the same thing in the sense that they want to make Jesus African American, right?
True.
That they want to literally read their story and their struggle into the Bible. And yeah, there are some parallels out of there, but it's it's just as much not understanding or prioritizing the Jewishness of it or the original context. And
I'm sure we can get Japaneses, Chineses, Guyaneses, wherever. You can just throw an SUS on the back of it, and that's their culture's version of Jesus.
Yeah. And it's also you see the thought stoppingness. Like there's this way in which we were supposed to ask this serious question of, is Christianity good for Black people? And we got a bunch of cognitive dissonance and people, extracting their own Jesus, and you got to get to the true Jesus, and the true Jesus is liberating, and we have this overarching narrative of separating the true Jesus from the Jesus of the state, and so you really see that, like, again, they can't take the question seriously, and they are pretending to represent a diversity of perspectives, but in reality, I just see a bunch of Black Christians who are arguing that, Jesus really loves Black people and everybody else is doing it wrong. The other thing is a certain arrogance to it. There's an arrogance of assuming that all these years of European and white in particular studying of the Bible, nobody got it right. This idea that the fact that they were able to do this must be a perversion of the faith. It must be because they're not true Christians. It must be because they're not real Christians. Rather than understanding, no, your faith is not sufficient to prevent this. Your faith does not truly liberate the slaves, because your Bible actually includes a manual in a book of regulations for slavery. Even your savior told the slave to obey his master. So that's part of the issue. No, they're real Christians. No, they're practicing the true Christianity. And like I said, that true Christianity made it so that your ancestors could be shipped from Africa on a goddamn slave ship named Jesus. And so there's just this arrogance, this way that they can be dismissive of it. And yeah, we could keep going. There was something else though. I did like the Jesus the Carpenter thing. And I think a lot of us need to talk about that, because we do need to the extent that we can't get rid of Christianity, we do need to push these people to me more towards the socialism, more towards the social values, more towards the social gospel. And in our current situation, that does to me look like solidarity and advocacy for workers and the working class. And I think highlighting this notion that Jesus was a carpenter, should be something these people need to be compelled about as they're doing the bidding of the uber rich and the elite. Go ahead, Mama McLaren.
Okay, so part of my grand hypothesis of how the Gospels are so fake and stuff like that, the book of Zechariah says that God says he will send 4 carpenters. Well, what profession is Jesus? A carpenter. The book of Jeremiah talks about God will send fishermen to fish his people, right, who are scattered in these other countries. What are the disciples? Fishermen. Anyway, that's all I got to say about that for this conversation. But I just think there's so much of it that is just so. Just happens to be a carpenter? Yes. How about that? I say, where are the other 3 carpenters? Where are they? But Jesus is going to send a comforter. He's going to send that. He has to go, and then he'll send that comforter.
Yeah, so you think it's just a symbolic thing, like he to fit an archetype?
People like Matthew, the writer of Matthew, are just brilliant and all you need is a list. You don't have to be a spectacular writer. You just have to sit down and do it. You just have to know which elements to bring back in from the other works of the Bible when you're writing your gospel to make your gospel more compelling. And for those who recall those things, it's more exciting. When I started to read Matthew and I'm remembering all these things from these other texts in the Bible, it was exciting because he is showing you how the pieces fit together. Where so often that work isn't done in the Bible. Zechariah is great at kind of setting up, hey, here's how some pieces fit together. But then it makes the mistake of explaining them. Revelation does the same thing too. It makes the mistake of explaining it to you. So you shouldn't be able to get it wrong, and yet people still do. Because as that lady pointed out, the woman who spoke before this guy, well, I want it to mean a particular thing to you.
Right.
Here's my hermeneutic. Not here's what it says.
Right.
Not here's exactly what it means, and it doesn't mean something else. Here's how I'd like you to take this.
Right. And so and the sad thing is, I honestly think some of these people are not even aware that they're engaging in apologetics.
No.
So when we look at Christianity as an institutionalized religion in America, we can all agree that it has been something that has been harmful to Black people. But we have seen research that talks about Christianity's African roots, the presence of Blacks in the Bible, and God's salvific work through Jesus for all nations. With this being the case, why do you think people still cling to the fallacy that Christianity is a white man's religion?
Can I say something to speak to that? So I think the premise of the question said, Christianity, but I think here in this nation we have Christianities, right? We have Christianities, and we've always had Christianities. I mean, as long as we have had enslaved people who are calling out to Christ for their liberation, we've had Christianities, multiple, plural. And so as we think about the Christianity of Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth and Mariah Stewart and Alexander Crummell and Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker and Rosa Parks and MLK, that's a different Christianity than the oppressor Christianity, right? So I think we got to talk about that. And I think, so I just want to make sure that as we sort of interrogate the question, I don't want to cede the title Christianity over to the oppressor Christianity, right? I don't want to say that what Christianity is what these white folks do. No, that's not true at all, you know, because to be a Christian is to be anointed with the anointing of the carpenter from Nazareth, to be anointed with the anointing of the one who willingly stepped into the caste system on the bottom of the caste system and who was willingly crucified so that we might be free. So to demonstrate solidarity with us and to overcome on our behalf, right? And so, so again, I want to talk about the Christianity of that Messiah, right? Rather than just the fact of it being weaponized against us. Part of the reason why I want to do that is because I don't want to always center white folks, as if, you know, we can't really have a conversation without really dealing with them and talking about what they've done, their misbehaviors. Right? I mean, it's not to say, I'm not trying to be naive about that. I understand that we're in a context, and I understand that we've got to respond to our context, and I understand that Christianity is the power of our Lord to actually liberate us and free us. It's an emancipatory reality, absolutely. And but I do think that we have a space, that we ought to have a space to be able to have this conversation without always sort of having their distortion of our faith at the center of our conversation.
All right, so a couple of things. One, I just think this idea of the idea of Christianity as being about liberation and freedom is ridiculous. It's not even just the fact that that it has a handbook on slavery and that Jesus tells slaves to obey their masters. It's literally the entire concept and nature of the relationship and what the God wants of his people is it's inherently about servitude, inherently. The other thing is, and people might not like to hear this, but the question was ill-formed by including the word fallacy. And Christianity is the white man's religion. People may not like to hear that. And I know that there's a historical Christianity. And at some point, as a faith that came from the Middle East and was practiced by brown people in the Middle East, there was a time in which they were obviously the core of Christianity. But when we say what is Christianity, again, it's kind of like, I think a lot of people have learned too much about the Bible and it's got them messed up. I have this disagreement with people about whether or not the Bible is, for instance, homophobic or things like that. And a lot of these people, they try to build their case up by going back to what the original manuscript said thousands of years ago, or what we think the original translation was. I'm like, when I ask what the Bible is or what the Bible says, we're talking about the Bible you go get if you go to a bookstore and buy a Bible. You go to a Christian bookstore and buy a Bible right now. What's in that Bible? That's the Bible. The ancient, the background, that's not the text we're dealing with. And I feel the same way about the faith. I'm not saying that you can't have these distinctions and these nuances and have those conversations. Yeah, they're conversations, they're productive conversations. But the reality is, for the most part, when we talk about Christianity, we're talking about its current form and what we're currently dealing with. And the real history of that is it didn't become a major world religion on the world stage until it became the major religion of the major colonialist oppressive empire. And even now in America, America is what it is because of our history is the establishment of white Christians. Even when people say stuff like, oh, America isn't really a Christian nation, it's really a secular nation, and there's always been separation. I think these people just fucking lying to themselves. I think people are just sniffing their own farts and literally buying into the boilerplate talking points of American delusion. This is a Christian nation. It's always been a Christian nation. The reason we have a quote unquote separation of church and state, the reason it was considered bad for the federal government to establish a particular religion is because they couldn't figure out which Christianity to pick. Again, you had the Baptists in this state versus the Catholics in this state versus the Mormons in Utah versus the Presbyterians over here. But if you look at anything outside of that, you're talking oppression. Muslims have always been an oppressed and discriminated against minority in this country. Jews have always been an oppressed and discriminated minority in this country. Non-believers have always been oppressed and discriminated against minority in this country. Even what we're dealing with now, most of these people, they full of shit when they're so alarmed about Christian nationalism and Christofascism, because again, we let this shit just creep up in us. Think about it right now. What does every single person do when you want to say that you're committed to telling the truth in the court of law? You swear on the goddamn Bible. If you were really serious about a separation of church and state, you would never, ever, ever bring a religious holy text into an important civil proceeding and literally then act like making a magic oath on the sacred religious text was the absolute necessity for us to even treat this as like a serious occasion. Every single president up and down ends their speeches with "God bless America." We went and reprinted the money to put God on it, rewrote the Pledge of Allegiance to include God. I mean, at some point, these people are just gaslighting us.
Yes.
Even when you look at Zionism, it's really a white supremacist colonial effort in which all Jews are not treated equally. But who is the primary backer of the white supremacist Zionist movement? It isn't even Jews. Once again, it's white evangelical Christians. So it just is. It is their religion. When 80% of them motherfuckers are voting for Trump and trying to establish Christian nationalism and being racist and all this other stuff, like that's what Christianity is. So to me, it is the white man's religion. I know that's not a popular opinion. I'm only speaking for myself. I don't speak for my one black friend or anybody else, but I'm gonna tell you straight like that. Go ahead.
Well, I heard a rather striking thing. I forget the guy's name on YouTube. He said one of the most profound statements about the Bible and those who believe in it that I've ever heard. He says, you can't personalize the Bible. Now, there is no listener to Hot Program that hasn't heard a Christian say, I have a personal relationship with God, or I have a personal relationship with Christ, or I have a personal relationship with Jesus. They literally are doing what this man says you can't do, but he's still right. The individuals have come up with their own versions of the religion. That's what this gentleman's comment, when he listed all those Black leaders through time, that's what they were doing. They had their very own version of the way they saw things. But what they're doing is they're taking their faith and then they're looking at the world and they're saying some things need to change. Some things aren't right. So I'm going to do my portion to assist in moving society forward because things should be right. They need to be right. So we
And that's
will, I mean, I'll bring that up again. You know, you can't personalize the Bible. I think that guy is right because then you're adding to the text.
yeah.
Go ahead, Pakman.
And that's what's sad about this is that these people are victims. They've been lied to, and it's just you just kind of it's especially transparent as a former Christian. It may not be apparent to you sitting up on a stage full of Christian thought leaders talking to a audience of a conference that's largely Christian, but talk to some ex-Christians, especially some Black ex-Christians, and we'll literally laugh at the idea that Christianity is about liberation. Like that's literally a point and laugh idea to us.
Right.
So it's such a different world.
I think that's an excellent point. And
Yeah, Carrie Ann lied to
your
betrayed.
question, Dr. Watson, the reason why people assert that Christianity is a white man's religion is because of the arrogance of whiteness. We have to think about when this nation is being constructed, in our pledge of allegiance is one nation under God. On our money is in God we trust.
Bro, she on my notepad?
The arrogance of whiteness is to put Christ as a cloak over the actual inhumane ways that this nation was organized, but it makes them feel better, right? I'll give a non-biblical example. There are a few different kinds of mac and cheese. There's Kraft, Easy Mac, mac and cheese. There's baked mac and cheese that goes in the oven.
They getting excited. Okay.
Kraft Easy Mac is in a little blue box. Probably cost you about $2, $3. You pour it on the top, stove top, add whatever they add, and all of a sudden you've got some runny Easy Mac. Or your family and them, your mama and them, your grandmama and them will cut up some sharp cheddar cheese.
Okay.
And make
Gotta
sure
have
that
it
they
sharp.
have the macaroni
Okay.
noodles and make sure
Okay.
it goes in the oven and pulls it
Okay,
out.
gotta have the
Now,
roux.
if
What about
you
the roux?
encounter somebody on your job who wants to do a potluck and folks sign up for what they want to bring and somebody raises their hand and says, I'll bring the mac and cheese, I would wager that Black folks are going to assume it's going to look one way and other folks are going to assume it's going to look another way. If Kraft Easy Mac shows up in the Tupperware, you're going to be mad. But they're both called mac and cheese. Neither person is incorrect in what they call it, but they are very different consistencies, very different experiences, very different traditions.
So this
and
is
you
the
can't go
mac
and
and
buy
cheeses
oven mac and cheese
explanation.
in one package. And so similarly, to the point of
I did not have this on my
Christianity,
bingo card for
there are very
2024.
ways that Jesus has been packaged. And I want to suggest to us that white Christianity is easy mac. It's easy to do. You put it on top. You stir it up a little bit. In God we trust, one nation under God. And everything else that you do, you hide behind that label. But Black Christianity requires some sweat and requires some recipes that have been passed down verbally and not written down. Requires some ways of figuring out the real and presenting that to our people. And so what I want to offer is the reason why folks think it's the white man's religion is because the white man has been arrogant enough to suggest that the only kind of mac and cheese is Easy Mac, when we know that baked mac and cheese exists and tastes better.
Well, oh glory.
Okay. Gang, woo.
Can you pause it?
That was peak. I just gotta say the mac and cheese. That was peak. That was so interesting. I did not expect. I did not see that coming at all.
Mac
Go
and
ahead, my
cheeses.
one black friend.
Amen.
That was oof.
Okay, this is a mac and cheese related comment. My wife likes macaroni and cheese. So she mentioned she liked the top. She wanted me to bring her some on a plate or whatever, and she wanted the top. So what I started to do when I make mac and cheese is I use a pizza pan, and I just take all of it, put it on the pizza pan, and spread it about 1 or 2 pieces of macaroni thick on the pizza
Very
pan. So
interesting.
it's all top.
It's all top. Very
It's all top.
interesting. Okay, I'm
Yeah,
gonna have
so
to
she
try that
liked that
out.
part. It's all top.
Interesting. That is actually super interesting.
And if you put cheese on the bottom of the pan, then you can cut it up like pizza because it binds it together underneath.
Right,
So,
right.
because as you know, mac and cheese doesn't really bind itself together. It sort of will just, oh crap.
Yeah. Now, again, for those that don't know, like, and we was having this conversation the other day in Gather, the real indicator food, the real indicator food is the potato salad. And it's interesting because for a lot of people, it's a side dish. It's not really focused, but it's a barometer. It says something about the nature of the cookout. And so you have to make sure that you have the right person on potato salad. And again, gang, if you put carrots or raisins in your potato salad, gang, no, okay. So look, all right. So the seriousness of what she was saying, and here's, and it's gonna be so interesting because in one sense she is right. Mac and cheese, I think the example to me was just kind of funny and silly, but in one way she is right. I use the example of Pinochle when I talk about Pinochle. Like I'll play in spaces because again, like most of the online games were programmed by white people, and a lot of times that's a lot of who be in them spaces, and they have different conventions than the game that was popularized by black people, even though most of us are pretty convinced that the way the actual double deck game that we like was popularized by black folks, largely in prison and in the military. And it's different conventions where our scoring and our way of playing is more fun. It makes the game move faster. And the scoring that they use is a holdover from single deck Pinochle. It's not even the right scoring for double deck. And literally the way the black folk do it is the official scoring of the goddamn National Pinochle Association. But literally when you talk to these white people about the game, they will actually say to you that you don't know what you're talking about and you don't know how to play the game because they don't know what the fuck is up. They don't know the history of the game. They don't understand the different variations, but because they're all white, they're all right. And it's a perfect example if they ain't even had this baked mac and cheese. If they would shut the fuck up and let us tell them about some of the traditions that we use and some of the scoring we use, they would find a much more fun, better game. This is all over the place. So there is always that thing where they make our cultural traditions feel not official, less significant, unimportant, ghetto, hood, all these other derogatory terms. It's anti-blackness at its core. What was also so interesting about that, though, was she brought in things like the oral tradition, right? Like you have to have some things passed down via word and da-da-da-da-da. There's a lot of discussion of this in academia. There's different ways of knowing and different ways of learning. And there is a way in which white supremacy has always favored literate traditions, right? You're considered a successful musician, for instance, when you can read. They place a lot of emphasis on sight reading, whereas in black traditions, there's different importance put on improvisation and also being able to play from memory. If you actually want to know the truth as a musician, all three of those things are very hard. And obviously great musicians and even good musicians can do a little bit at least of all three, right? But all of deserving of respect. It's hard to get together with musicians you've never played with and literally improvise something that a live audience gets as a coherent and wonderful experience. Like, it's crazy. There's also a lot to like memorizing shit. Like when you play on in a concert, most of y'all go to a pop concert or something like that, or whatever genre it is, and there's a band playing. That band, you don't see nobody reading no goddamn sheet music. That band has memorized every single note of that entire show, and they do it the same way every single time, every single day. That takes a lot to memorize a 2 hours, an hour and a half concert, right? That's a lot. Okay. It's also a lot to be able to see a piece of music sight unseen, you know, fumble your way through it a couple times in rehearsal and then perform it live, basically reading it, you know, like they're all hard, but there is, you know, like people put different importance on things. But what's so interesting about that is it's one of the ways in which some of these problems can creep in. Because I think a lot of it then is, at least my experience of sort of the Black church and things like that, they're not taking the literate tradition serious enough. In other words, the Bible necessarily, now it's not really what it says in the Bible, even though the faith ascribes that it's super biblical and it's all about the Bible, but a lot of them are not reading the Bible. But now you got this other thing, maybe it's not even important to read the Bible. And then that creates this space where the oral tradition, the real tradition that we pass down to each other, is about this Black liberation theology, right? Where Jesus Christ is really a brother, and they won't talk about the African origins of Christianity, and you see what I'm saying? And so you get all this fucking nonsense, you know, just because something's passed down to you orally doesn't mean it's true, right? It you know, and we lose some important filters of putting it all on paper, seeing what it really is, so that it can be scrutinized and brought to the light. So there, you know, setting the kind of funny silliness of the mac and cheese example aside, there was a lot to what she said.
Well, look, when she is describing what goes into a mac and cheese, you said yourself, what about the roux? What about the roux?
Yeah.
Your tradition of mac and cheese sounds like it might differ from hers.
Yeah.
That goes back to the original point that it's a hodgepodge. It is not the
Right.
Nobody's sticking to the text, or very few people are sticking to the text. They all want their own version of it, right? On our table back in our kitchen in California, there are all these hot sauces. And then I have a cabinet that has more. My wife says, I counted how many hot sauces you have in the cabinet. There are more than 30 different ones in there. Now, this is not going to happen even at a restaurant in Cuba. They won't have that, but I have that. And she doesn't understand why it's necessary. Again, there's several on the table. I bought a set that came together. We have some left. It's not her way. It's not their way. If I go to my uncle's house later, I guarantee you, if I open up their cabinet, he's probably got at least 4 different hot sauces in that cabinet.
Yep.
On top of ketchup.
Yes, you gotta have a range of hot sauces.
Yeah, exactly. So what people do is they flavor or they season their religion to their taste.
Yes.
When I argue with a lot of these people on Instagram or Facebook about what the Bible actually says, because I try to bring them back to that so they can see what they believe. Like, no, here's what you say represents you, but then what you tell me you believe isn't that. It's not what's in the text. Like, you made this up, or you remembered wrong. You conflated two things that don't even go together, which happens regardless of the subject. That can happen if I listen to Lawrence Krauss speak about physics. He might do that. It's just something human beings do. So I think us, for our audience as well, just be willing to check people when they get it wrong. And you also have to be willing to say, that checks out with what I read. What you say is indeed in alignment with what I read. And they might appreciate or even respect you for that, and maybe take you more seriously when you disagree, because it's clear you have some understanding. One of my interlocutors on Facebook, he wrote that no one has seen God. And I was like, I hasten to agree with you. However, here's what your Bible says. And I give him like 6 examples of where he can go read in his own Bible where people saw God. He thought I didn't know what I was talking about. So to all those people listening, 40 people or so that follow that chain, he thinks he's an authority figure. And yet I keep showing up to go, no, you got it wrong, man. You got your own book wrong. I told him I will give you one of these Bibles if you want one. I will pay for it.
Yeah, I think it's crazy. I don't know if they just think they know what's in it. It's so weird. I mean, to be honest, a lot of this religion stuff, especially in today's climate, can be chalked up to they just never did the fact checking.
I think
and
that's it,
so
Dr.
it's
Blocker.
it's kind of so disappointing that it's this information is just so easy to get to. That was another thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. I really have to say, I remember some years ago, probably about 21 years ago, I sat down with some people I felt were devout Christians and studied the Bible, a little bit of the Bible for the first time. And I remember how moved I was to read their selected passages in their first principles teaching of how Jesus died for me and made this tremendous sacrifice for me. I remember how moving and impactful that was. I didn't really think about it. The normal me, the accountant in me says, wait, he was only dead for 3 days? He didn't stay dead? There's a problem here. What kind of sacrifice is that? That's almost like cheating. If you go down knowing you're going to get back up, then you're kind of faking it.
It's also again, it's so poorly motivated, right? The notion of sacrifice to me is so creepy to me. Like it scares me when I think about people venerating the idea of sacrifice. And I think it's a huge part of our problem with our economic and social system. We've been brainwashed to believe that it's good to strive, it's good to struggle, it's good to have hardship. And yeah, those things may be necessary traits in the capitalist hellhole in which we find ourselves. But it's not something to celebrate or venerate, rather than something to work towards not being necessary. For those of us that don't believe in an afterlife, we recognize that this is the only life we have. And so if we were to ever experience anything closer to heaven, we'd have to make a world that was closer to heaven, right? And to me, the ideal society, you don't have to work to survive. Because is that the ideal state? Is that the ideal? If the average person works 8 hours a day, that's a third of your life. Oh, and another third, according to the doctors and them folks, is basically sleeping. So that's gone too. And the reality is, most of y'all gotta put more time in just to stay right for work, right? Maintaining your car, commuting back and forth, getting ready, transitioning, going to the gym, whatever it is, such that when you get to your personal time is limited now to like probably a few hours a day, at least throughout the week, right? And then maybe you get like a day and a half on the weekend because you got a maintenance and kids and run around and grocery stores and all this other stuff.
I'll
So
tell you.
think
Go ahead,
about how
go
much
ahead.
work then dominates our time. Is that real? Is that really the ideal? I'll tell you what's interesting to me too. All the people who support the billionaire class and all these right wingers that are always talking about work, and money. They seem to be the same people that epitomize the ideal of a 4-hour work week and how to outsource everything and all this type of stuff. They don't want to work. Go ahead, my little black friend.
Sure. I got a brother who's fairly sick. Like he's at the point where they're doing experimental drugs on him to keep him alive.
Damn.
And I got to see him yesterday. I took my wife and my cousin's son. We went over to Georgia to visit him. He used to drag race motorcycles. He's no longer in fit enough condition to do so. He's got like one of the fastest Hayabusa motorcycles in the world, like legend. You're probably not going to beat him because there's only a handful of guys that can. Not even a handful of guys that can. So, or his motorcycle, he doesn't ride it anymore. But anyway, he's very tired a lot of the time. Doesn't really do a whole lot. But yesterday, he was at a friend's house cleaning her motorcycle. He's very close to her family. Her husband was his best friend, one of his best friends. And he's over there, and he is as happy as I had seen him in years.
That's
because he was doing something he loved.
Yes.
Right? He wasn't, I got to put together this spreadsheet. It's not me. I got to do this spreadsheet to make this complicated process so people only have to put like 6 numbers in it and spits out everything. You know, that's what I love that sort of thing. But even I would rather be working on a motorcycle than doing that if I knew I had maybe 2-3 years left to live. But yeah, I would say let that be a lesson to you from Pocket Locker and my brother. Enjoy your time, enjoy your free time. And there are those people, who, like my aunt that I'm staying with, she loves to church it up, man, so much. I know this when I saw her on Saturday morning or Friday morning. I'm wearing a shirt that says "Y'all need Jesus," and it just made her day. It just made her day.
Wow.
Because that's her world, right?
Yeah.
If she got the news my brother got, and she had 2 years left, maybe, and was gonna be on these experimental drugs that might possibly save her life, she's gonna be in church.
Yeah, be in church. And I was gonna say, how many people would spend if they knew they had like 2 or 3 jobs? They'd be spending those years doing everything they can to spread the gospel. It's just sad.
Well, now Pocket Locker, I think you can answer that question because you have what, grandparents in their 80s?
Yeah, my grandmother was that way when she had cancer. Yeah, and they're still that way.
That's it. That's it. But you know what? I'd be willing to say your grandmother is maybe 1 in 100 when it comes to that. 1 in 100.
To be honest,
maybe that number is too large.
I honestly think there's a lot of doubt that comes in with that. Like I think a lot of people have a serious season of doubt when they get a fatal diagnosis.
My uncle did.
Yeah. I think that's because that's when things get real. All right, let's see if we can get through another clip or two.
Okay.
I appreciate the mac and cheese analogy. Yes. And one of the things that I want to sort of bring us back to, I know we're very 21st century people, and we think we have a heightened sense of intellect. We like to think of ourselves as our ancestors' wildest dreams, as if they didn't have any of their own. And I want to say that I think we actually need to go back to look at the invisible church, the enslaved church. Because one of the things that's a marvel to me is that they were able to discern what real Christianity was, even when it was being presented to them in ways that were not the full gospel. And the reason for that is that, and I want us to think back to this, why literacy was so dangerous, right? Yep. Why there were laws against literacy for enslaved people had everything to do with the fact that they were trying to keep enslaved people from the Word of God.
Amen.
Because they knew that once they redirected and were able to read the Bible for themselves and see the God of the Bible, not the one that was being caricatured to them as if, the only thing was slaves obey your masters, but they got to see the totality of the Word of God.
Wow.
Is when they were able to see the truth. I think about this story. There was an enslaved man who ran away, a man named Henry Atkinson, who ran away from Virginia. And when he got to the North and he began to worship in a congregation of free blacks, one of the things he said, yeah, back there, they didn't preach the whole gospel to us.
Amen.
And so I think that's important for us to understand just how much it was rooted in them understanding and knowing the Word of God for themselves. And what grieves me is that in our fancy 21st century ancestors' dream that we all think we're living in, where we have all kinds of Bible translations, where we got the Bible on our pocket, in our hands, that we would allow excuses to get us from reading the Word of God and learning who God is for himself. So I think we actually need to go to learn from our enslaved ancestors to be able to say they had a hunger for the Word of God. I think of these stories during Reconstruction when enslaved people were free, that the first things they wanted to do, and they built these educational institutions in their churches. The first things they did were build churches. Right here in Richmond, there's a church that was built from enslaved people. They literally would go to work all day as sharecroppers, come home and build a church. And one of the things they did was use the church for their spiritual sustenance as well as their educational sustenance. And one of the things you would see, 80-year-old great-grandmothers alongside their 6-year-old great-grandchildren learning how to read and write. And when they would ask these people why they were trying to learn to read at this old age, like you haven't learned to read this whole time, they said, I want to read the Bible for myself. And so I think we do well to have that hunger for the Word of God, because that's really when they saw where their liberation came from.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. I'm about to say some shit that people might consider mad disrespectful, but I think it's true. So I'll wait till you're back in the car to bring you back. You can hear it. There's some truth to what she's saying in the sense of them not wanting Black people to read the whole Bible and them not being preached the whole gospel. We know historically there was a slave Bible, and that the slave Bible, had a lot of stuff removed, like Exodus and stuff like that, because it's true, they didn't want them getting ideas about freedom and liberty and stuff like that. I just want to make it clear that my point is more, because that's true, but my point is more that you have to be super arrogant to genuinely believe that even with the full Bible, that it could not be appreciated and understood, and yet still have whites oppress Blacks in the way they did, or white Christians in particular. That's the problem. The idea that that's not the real Christianity. They don't know the true Christianity. They didn't understand the actual gospel. No, they did. They did. They just didn't think it applied to you. They still don't think it applies to you. And that does mean that there's a limit of that book, and it is, and you could also see the cognitive dissonance where she even said, "Oh, it goes beyond just the slaves obey your master." Like she knows that type of stuff is in there. The other thing is, and it kind of goes back to that John Dominic Crossan quote. My point, once again, is not that those ancient people told literal stories and we are now smart enough to take them symbolically, but that they told them symbolically and we are now dumb enough to take them literally. I think there was always been a way in which, especially for slaves, that Black Christianity was performative. And I think in many ways it's continued to be. And by that I mean, I think earlier they wanted they adopted Christianity out of a hope that it would humanize them. They adopted Christianity out of the hope that they could reclaim some dignity and in the process improve their material conditions. And I think that has continued to be the case for many Black Christians. That they want to show, hey, look, I can be an American too. I can be a church-going, God-fearing, cross-wearing Christian just like you. Now, would you please get your fucking boot off my neck? And it's never worked. And it's never going to work. And again, there's also this fundamental problem of Black Christians, and I'm really glad we got a panel of Black Christians or current Black Christians, kind of showing us this in their own language. But trust me, I know this. They don't even take the possibility of being wrong or the religion not being true seriously at all. This idea that they didn't want you to know the whole gospel in no way, shape, or form means that the rest of what they were hiding from you gets you closer to the truth. What they're concerned about is they think it gets you to a more liberating narrative. It doesn't. Again, sure, there were some parts they didn't want you to read because you get ideas about freedom, but that doesn't mean that Christianity is a tradition about liberation or the true gospel is about freedom. It's bullshit. But more importantly, them hiding aspects of the faith from you doesn't make the faith and the fundamental claims of the faith consistent with reality. And this is the part that Black people need to get their fucking heads wrapped around. The most important critique of the faith is that it's not true.
So I think Howard Thurman says that there's a difference between religion about Jesus and the religion of Jesus, right? The religion about Jesus just gives us Jesus' biography, some places where his feet trod, where he healed, how he was born, how he died. But the religion of Jesus is actually invested in those letters that older Bibles used to have in red, right? And so part of what Christianity has to be connected to, if it's going to be about the way of Jesus, and to also honor the fact that Jesus never called what he was doing Christianity, right? It was called the way.
Wow.
Right? And
the
way doesn't seem to look anything like what we currently call Christianity, right? Because Christianity has been allied with power, it's been allied with whiteness, it's been allied with maleness, it's been allied with all these other forms of identity markers that actually don't honor those teachings that we actually find in red. And I always wonder, like, what makes sure
Okay. He said something super important here.
We currently call Christianity, right? Because Christianity has been allied with power, it's been allied with whiteness, it's been allied with maleness, it's been allied with all these other forms of identity.
And here's the thing that he does that we don't get that Black Christians don't get. Black Christianity's done all them same shits. Black Christianity, this is such a. My one Black friend, glad you listen to this real quick. This is so important right here.
He was doing in Christianity, right? In those letters that older Bibles used to have in red, right? And so part of what Christianity has to be connected to, if it's going to be about the way of Jesus, and to also honor the fact that Jesus never called what he was doing Christianity.
All right, that's dumb. But
It was
listen to this
called
part
the way.
after this.
Right?
After this,
And the way doesn't seem to look anything like what we currently call Christianity, right? Because Christianity has been allied with power, it's been allied with whiteness, it's been allied with maleness, it's been allied with all these other forms of identity markers that actually don't honor those teachings that we actually find in red.
okay. This is another problem. This is a huge problem of the black church. Matter of fact, this is an even more important issue in the black church because we're black. Black Christianity has allied itself with power. Again, when you want to secure the black vote, what do? You don't go talk to black leaders. You don't go talk to the black doctors or lawyers or community organizers or neighborhood associations. You go to the black churches. It has allied itself with maleness and whiteness. What do black Christians do? They present a white aesthetic to us, right? The black Christians are the ones who are always saying, pull up your pants and don't bring yourself into the house of God without your shirt and tie on, and use the King's English and don't talk in slang. And again, the black Christians are reifying this alliance of Christianity with power and maleness and whiteness. Again, how many black men are doggedly misogynist due to the influence of Christianity? Because they're the man and they've got to be the head of the household, and the woman's got to know her place. And don't even get me started on the homophobia and anti-LGBTQ stuff in the black community as a result of the influence of religion, and particularly Christianity. So these are all incredibly important critiques of Christianity that he's making in terms of white Christians, but he did not recognizing how black Christians and the black church are complicit in all of these things. And it's even more problematic because we're actually the black people.
Well, if you call it out, he might have to take it away.
What do you mean?
You might, sure, the stick to use control over the masses. If you call him on it, now you take that stick away, because you basically lift the scales from the eyes of the people watching it, and they kind of think something's going on, but now they know something's going on. Like, wait, this is what I was trying to get away from. I didn't find what I wanted. I found another version of what I didn't want that felt less toxic, but in actuality, it was not. It's the same. It just comes in a different color.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I always wonder, like, what makes you a disciple if you're not actually interested in studying the teachings of the person you're following, right? Like, to know someone's biography does not make you a disciple of that person, right? If that was the case, my mother would be a disciple of Marvin Gaye or Aretha Franklin, right? If all you needed to do was know someone's biography, right? There has to be a curriculum that you invest yourself in. And fortunately, that has been curated for us in red letters, so we actually know what the content of the way should be. And that's not what we often see in Americanized forms of Christianity. Are we actually invested in? So why is Christianity seen as the white man's religion, or the religion of whiteness? It's because it is easy and it is costless just to learn Jesus' story without actually putting your body in the game to live his teachings, right?
Wrong. It's because we live in a society of white imperialist oppressor colonialism, okay? And Christianity is the religion of that imperial power. That's what it's we live in a white supremacist world, and Christianity is the official religion of white supremacy. That's what black folk need to accept. Is really is I know it's you can see it's a struggle. You can see they're having a real hard time with this one. They're having a real hard time with this one. But
Well, it goes back to what I said in the earliest episodes of our program. Religion is useful. If you want to
very
maintain control over billions of people, religion is useful. Think of it. You can pass it down. You can pass control down, right? And keep it within your group. Let's use modern politics as an example. It's a wonderful example. The people who are so fond of Donald Trump, many of them will tell you he's a Christian man. They will tell you that he's picked by God and go on and on and on, giving him one accolade after the next. But if you start to raise objections, well, he cheated on his wife. That's not a very Christian thing. His wives. That's not a very Christian thing to do. Well, people make mistakes and they can be forgiven. Well, that's true. People can be forgiven and people do make mistakes. He is into filthy lucre. Well, the man made a name for himself and he continued the family. I can go on and on and on, showing him how what they have said about him is false.
I know.
And it doesn't matter.
It doesn't. It doesn't.
Because it is what they want to believe is more important than what the religious text says. That is what this man is telling us.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
He's saying the words in red are really the way. As he says, they're the way. But the way is not the practice that we see in the world.
Yeah, and also just to be clear, the way seems like socialism. And another thing that Black Christians are wrapped up in is the gospel of prosperity and the upward mobility associated with it. To be honest, that is a huge part of this. Even the way these people present themselves on this panel, it's very like, you either go high class African or you go with that Kings of Comedy look, as you said, right? But there's very much the denigration of appearances associated with Black culture, and a lot of people, if you feel like you're blessed by God, if God is helping you make it, and that means to be doing better economically. So it's super frustrating.
The intro to these video clips to this conference refers to these people on the panel as thought leaders. Thought leaders. That's not a mistake. That's a well-chosen word. Thought leaders tell people how to think. They tell them what to think and how to address counterpoints to that way of thinking.
Right.
They are programmers. That's what a thought leader does. It is their mission. Tony Robbins, right? You can pay him a lot of money and he'll tell you can walk on hot coals and not be burned, although he's been sued by people who walked on hot coals and were burned. He does not, I don't know if in his seminars he explains the physics going on behind that the ash creates an excellent thermal barrier that repels the heat. And you're supposed to wet your feet before you do it so the ash sticks to your feet. So when you walk across those hot coals, they don't burn you. Well, the guys who figured this out thousands of years ago must appear like they have some special power to the people who don't understand it.
And to be clear too, I know a big part of the argument for these Black Christians is that they don't identify with the white Christians. But it has to be said clear that the white Christians are identified as the power core of Christianity. And it just renders all of them hypocritical. I cannot tell you how much these people, right? They're all patriots and liberty and America. And I cannot tell you how much, if you go to one of their churches, they are obsessed with porn, right? Think about this. Mike Johnson, Young Earth Creationist, Speaker of the House, literally is on Covenant Eyes, and his porn accountability partner is his son. These people are weird. It's like a weird,
born again Christians.
strange, born again Christians, weird obsession with porn. Donald Trump is on trial for interfering with an election by covering up his affair with a porn star. I can't. Nothing they say is anything. Nothing. If you cannot tell me you were about freedom, liberty, sexual purity, family, none of that. None of that. They're all 100% committed to voting for this man. He is on trial for interfering in an election by covering up an affair with a porn star. You can't make this shit up, y'all.
The way he actually lived, to have the faith of Jesus and not just the faith about Jesus. And how do we get there? And I want to say this also is that I don't think it is important to talk about what white people are doing. I think it is important for us to name the way whiteness works, right? And I make a distinction between white people and whiteness. Because whiteness is an ideology, it's a doctrine, it's a way of understanding the world that negates black beauty, black joy, black freedom, black love, black salvation, black hope, right? It's a way of knowing and a way of being in the world. And whiteness is not limited to white people, because whiteness inhabits black bodies all the time. Right? And so, because whiteness as an ideology, which has nothing to do with ancestry, nothing to do with skin color, is demonic. And it must be exercised like we would do every other demon, right? Like, I think as people who are black people, this is what black people have done well. We have been political and economic exorcists, right? That we know how to cast out demons that aren't just spiritual, but demons that are also political and demons that are also economic, right? So in that brush harbor, right, outside of the gaze of whiteness, our ancestors weren't just converted to Christianity, they converted Christianity itself to actually look like the very carpenter that the religion says it follows.
Yeah.
All right, we'll stop there and get our concluding thoughts in response to this guy. That was interesting. We wouldn't necessarily disagree that they converted Christianity.
Again, I can sum it up as I already have. Religion is useful. But look, think of the mobilization that can occur if you say this or that person is a Christian. It automatically gives a person credibility regardless of how poorly they follow the dictates of the religion. Like a Trump, there are millions, tens of millions of people that think that Trump is what Biden is. Somebody who goes to church pretty much every Sunday. Somebody who has a long-standing record of their faith practice. Right? Biden is that.
Right.
Trump is not that, but people think he is. He owns lots of Bibles. Dude, you own a hotel. I imagine you do have a lot of Bibles. Not because you read them or you enjoy them in any sort of way, but because the Gideons or the manager ordered them and had them delivered there. Not because of any deep connection he has with God. I will again be happy to refer our audience to the Antichrist 45 channel, where this guy, Brother Paul, states his evidence that Trump is the Antichrist. I find it hilarious. I don't think Trump is the Antichrist because I don't think Jesus was even a historical figure. I'm really giving him a lot of credit I don't think they earned when I say at best he was a con man from the first century. But you still have those people. Again, I hate to say this term, clout. when someone says they are Christian, they automatically get a bunch of exceptions granted to them. And they can treat you whatever kind of way they want to after that, if you believe them. That's how it goes. That's our nation. That's the United States. And they can do it in other countries too.
Yeah. So, I definitely agree with all that. I think, for me, it was interesting that in so many ways, I think for Black Christians, Christianity is about Black liberation. It's about their struggle. It's about their freedom. You do get this when you go to Black churches, that Christianity is the thing that is responsible for their resilience. And it's the thing they need to place their hope in for further progress. And that really does, I want to say impede, but actually it really prevents them from engaging in a true analysis of Christianity's influence on Black people. First off, and I will conclude with this too, like, you know, the main criticism is the first criticism. Black people deserve the truth, and Christianity is not true. And nowhere in this conversation do you hear any sort of critical reflection about the possibility that the claims of Christianity might not be true. The reason that is so important is because it changes the whole conversation. You can't say something is a good instrument for us to rely on if it isn't true. And it's really important that Black Christians get ready for what's coming, because that's what's coming is people like us that are willing to challenge the core claims of the faith. But beyond that, there really becomes a fictive theology and an accompanying fictive history of the faith that supports this narrative of Black liberation that really isn't honest about the way the Black church is an instrument of regression and is holding us back. And you know, it's just that's y'all know that's what we're about, and we're gonna keep fighting a good fight. But that's definitely the message we're trying to, or at least the message I'm trying to get out here to them. My one Black friend, you got anything coming up?
Just the baby, but that's not until the end of September. I don't. Things have been really slow with the career and trying to figure out what to do about, you know, sell our house, keep our house, and all that stuff. So I don't have anything going on other than I'm told probably next Saturday I will get my truck back. So maybe I'll make a little video about all the stuff I need to do to finish that darn thing. But
Yeah, I'm sure people would check that out.
Yeah, it's looking good. I did start a YouTube channel called Honorable Wrenchin', but there's no content there. And on Instagram, it's Honorable Wrenchin'. So it's like,
what's that going to be about?
Just
the tooling,
cars and trucks. Yeah, cars and trucks, and more so, I guess my focus is the financial cost of actually building these things. Like, do you even want to do it?
Sure.
I'll give you an example with suspension. How are you going to use the car dictates what kind of suspension you buy. Most people don't need to spend the money I spent redoing their chassis, so it's a high performance thing, when all they want to do is take their grandkids to go get ice cream. You don't spend that kind of money that I spent.
Right.
You don't. If you're going to use it to commute, you might want to, but if it's just a Sunday cruiser, no, don't waste your money. But what would it cost if you wanted to autocross? There's 10 different packages that you could put on that vehicle. Well, what do they cost and which one is right for you? That's kind of the focus. When it comes to painting, how much do you need to spend on paint? Can you do it yourself? You know, what do you do if you don't have a lot of money, but you want to change the color of your car? Do you wrap it, or do you just buy cheap paint and borrow your buddy's gear and you shoot your car one weekend.
Sure,
You know.
sure.
So that sort of thing.
All right. Well, you got some subs over there. Crystal subbed, and yeah, check it out, Honorable Wrenching, and we'll add a link in the description. So shoot me that when you get a chance. All right, gang. Thank y'all so much. Really appreciate everybody for tuning in. It's been a ton of fun. Really
And
thankful for everybody in chat.
I apologize for my technical difficulties.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Don't forget to like the video on your way out. Subscribe to the channels if you're not. There are links in the description. Let's go hang out and gather. All right, I'll see you guys and gather. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.